Let me ask you, have you ever heard of the game development company Quintet?
No, I thought not. It's not a story the Jedi would tell you.
Quintet is, or rather was, a company that developed only a few games in their short-lived lifespan. I mean, literally, look, this is their entire Wikipedia page. And yet, the games they did make very often pop up in greatest Super Nintendo games of all time lists. Even still though, their name never really seems to be talked about by the general gamer public. In certain circles, sure, but for a company that was releasing banger after banger after banger back to back to back, they very quickly faded away into obscurity. I don't know, maybe it's a holdover from just how the times were back then. Like, I don't know if it's just me, but when I was a kid, I didn't know game development companies at all. Like, hold on, let me pull some things off the shelf here. Alright, so this was my entire gaming library from the time I was born until the PS1 came out. You know, minus a few Genesis games that I just haven't repurchased yet, but you get the picture. This was it. As a kid, not only could I not tell you the developer of these games, I barely knew the names of the actual games. Like, this was Ninja Game. This was Baseball. These were Mario 1, 2, and 3. This was that weird game that I don't really like playing. This was Mario Cookie Game, and finally, this was The Butt Game. My brother and I would play the horizontal bar section and just crack up over how much their little pixelated butts stick out, so we dubbed this The Butt Game. The point is, these weren't games developed by Nintendo, Jaleco, or Tecmo, these were just Nintendo games. And the same goes for the Super Nintendo. Like, I mentioned it in one of my old videos, but my grandma had a Super Nintendo at her house for when us kids came over. She had a random assortment of games, most of which were certified bangers, but among them was this strange one. It's a game where you play as like a kid named Will that has a flute or something. I don't know, I don't get it. It looked cool, but we couldn't figure out what to do. Like, you don't jump on turtles, you don't collect rupees, so I'm bored. Turn it off and just slap Super Ghouls and Ghosts back on. Or was it Super Ghosts and Goblins? I don't know. They changed the name. But it's always how it went. Yet every time we would go to Grandma's, we would try this game again. We would get stuck in that same starter town, turn the game off, and just go back to Super Mario World, but we always at least gave it a shot. And then as my siblings and I aged, so did our understanding of how games worked. Eventually, one of those times trying this weird game, we figured it out. We left town, we found ourselves in a dungeon, we learned that your flute is actually like a weapon. Whoa, you can turn into a big guy with a sword? What was the Outcast game in Grandma's collection was now the main focus when we would come to visit. We had to get to the next part. Our save file was still there from last time. Awesome, let's continue this game. Alright, you get the picture. It's Illusion of Gaia. Quintet made Illusion of Gaia. The video is about Quintet. The intro is getting kind of long. Let's just get into the video, play the intro noise. Let's go. Do the thing. So, Quintet is responsible for some bangers. Right off the bat, ActRaiser. And if you haven't played it, I mean, do yourself a favor one night this weekend and just give it a try. You can beat it in an afternoon. Like, it's super short, but it's really solid. For a first game from a new company, it's phenomenal. They followed that up with Soulblazer, Illusion of Gaia, Terranigma, and, you know, some other ones in between that probably aren't as good. I don't know, maybe they're even better than these. I haven't played them yet. Get off my back, dude. The point is, you had a company that knocked it out of the park on the Super Nintendo and then just kinda disappeared. Kinda. Like, they released a few more games before falling off the face of the earth, but none that I had ever heard of, to be honest. I'm sure these are beloved by the people that did, but from what I can see, you know, Grand Stream Saga only sold like 63,000 units. Planet Laika, I can't even find mention of sales numbers, only mention of it being a commercial failure. By contrast, they came out swinging with ActRaiser and sold like 620,000 copies, which is so impressive for a first game from a new company. Soulblazer, about 300,000 copies, Gaia, about 700, Terranigma, about 200,000 copies just in Japan alone. These aren't Final Fantasy numbers, but they're not failures. They're respectable as hell sales numbers for a new company hitting a super competitive market. So, what happened? How do you go from a string of bangers to being
erased from existence?
I think to understand Quintet, you have to understand something about the gaming industry in the 90s as a whole. It's like I mentioned in the intro, developers and companies weren't really the face of their games like they are today, consoles were. It wasn't Capcom makes Castlevania, it was, well, the Super Nintendo has Super Castlevania 4, which is really fun, but the Genesis has Castlevania Bloodlines, which is way more brutal and way cooler. Most people didn't know what a Capcom was. I mean...
Do I look like I know what a Capcom is? I just want a picture of a goddamn Castlevania 4.
Hi, sorry to interrupt. BitPixel from the future here in the middle of editing. So Konami makes Castlevania, not Capcom. Realize that while I'm in the middle of editing. But look at all this work I've already done. Look at this. I can't cut that out. So, yeah, pretend I said Konami instead of Capcom. And back to the video. All I knew was that there were games on consoles. That's a shift in the industry that matters a lot because it meant developers like Quintet could be producing incredible games, yet they would remain invisible. It's different nowadays. Like nowadays, you know what a developer makes. You see Square Enix, you know it's probably going to be an RPG. You see Rockstar, you know it's going to be a master-crafted money printer. You see EA, and you know it's going to be absolute dog shit. And yet, despite being an invisible presence behind the games, there is a strange theme that connects the big three games made by Quintet. I say big three, it's really big four. I mean, like, ActRaiser kind of fits into this too, but, you know, the main three I'm talking about are known as the Soulblazer trilogy. Soulblazer, Illusion of Gaia, and Terranigma. They aren't really a trilogy in the sense that they're directly linked in any way. Instead, they all kind of share this similar, fairly dark theme. I don't know. You expect retro games, especially on the Super Nintendo, to be somewhat lighthearted, like fun, funny, high fantasy, whimsical, I don't know. These games are the polar opposite. These are dark games. You go in expecting bog standard RPGs, and you're instead met with themes of existentialism, slavery, death, rebirth, sacrifice, being forced to grow up in the face of adversity. It's just, these aren't normal 90s games, dude. Soulblazer has the most simple gameplay loop of the three. Like, you enter a dungeon, you kill monsters that are continuously respawning, you beat the last one and its spawner disappears, you get a little cutscene showing something somewhere else coming back to life, you know, a house, an NPC, a town, a flower, whatever. Civilization slowly comes back into existence based on your heroic actions. Then you can go explore that town that you saved little by little, talk to the people, shop, whatever. Like, I don't know, I just played through this game for the first time earlier this year, and it's such a cool concept that I've never seen again in another game. Like, some indie dev needs to hop on this shit and make a spiritual successor, because it's pretty cool. The game is a tad clunky and simple, but honestly, I think it's kind of the most fun out of the three. It's just good, simple fun. But at its core, it's all about rebuilding a failed world and bringing its inhabitants back. Not a super involved story, but those themes I mentioned are present. Moving on to Gaia, things are going to get a lot more story-driven. As a kid at Grandma's house, this was that silly little flute kid game that I couldn't figure out, but as an adult, it is a masterclass in storytelling from a janky time in video game history. It improves on the combat from Soulblazer a bit, but the main focus of this game is on the story, less so the dungeons and combat. I mentioned in my video, Do You Even Enjoy Gaming Anymore?, that some old RPGs are like books, games that start with page 1 and every moment playing is just turning pages. That's this game, like 100%. I don't even remember a single side quest, it's all just forward momentum, and it's fantastic. This whole game is a solid, memorable experience. Every town, every dungeon, every story beat, like, it is a masterpiece on the console worthy of the praise that it does receive. But it's also just extremely dark and depressing. There's a common trope in stories that revolve around a younger protagonist, that whole, like, loss of innocence and childhood thing, and usually it's in the form of a single event. You know, like, Eren Yeager watches his hometown get decimated by titans, he watches his mother be eaten in front of him, and he vows to kill them all. Madoka thinks that being a magical girl is all cute fun and games, and then she watches as the happy-go-lucky magical girl she looked up to gets decapitated in front of her. Shinji Ikari has to get in the robot and fight because for whatever reason it was decided that only child pilots can put their lives on the line and save the world from angels. It's usually a single traumatic event that makes a young protagonist abandon their childhood innocence to rise up and become the hero that the writers decided they would be. But that's not the case in Gaia. Like, This story is peppered throughout with trauma, causing Will and his friends to grow up. There are towns filled with human remains because famine has taken over the lands and the inhabitants that still remain are just slowly starving to death. There's an Incan ship full of skeletal remains, all waiting for the return of their king. 2 children are adrift at sea for 3 weeks, coming to terms with the idea that you have to either kill other living creatures around you for sustenance or die yourself. Oh, and at the end of that, you catch scurvy and almost die, so, that's fun. There's a town where the child slave trade is booming. There's literally, you play a game of Russian roulette with poison drinks, this is not a normal, cute little RPG story. It's strangely grounded and human. It's dark and mysterious. It's eerie yet beautiful. There aren't many games like this in existence, especially from that era of gaming, and it rightfully deserves to be cemented in top 10 lists for the console. And finally, we have Terranigma. I won't lie, this entire game is one long fever dream. Do you ever play something and about halfway through you pause and you just ask yourself, what the hell is even happening right now? That's Terranigma in a nutshell. It is absolutely the most ambitious of the 3, and the gameplay is 100% the most refined. The combat feels great, whereas the other 2 have pretty static standstill/sword mechanics. This has you running around, dashing, doing sick jump attacks, and it's got a magic system that can mostly be ignored, except for one single fight in the game. If you've played it, you know the one I'm talking about. But there is that connecting theme between all of them. Soulblazer is about rebuilding the doomed world with your heroic actions. Gaia is about exploring and experiencing that world, the good sides and the bad. Terranigma is about shaping that world, creating it from nothing. You start in the underworld and your goal is to resurrect the entirety of the surface. The continents, the plants, the animals, the humans, civilization. It's more similar to Soulblazer in that regard, but there you revive everything and you're the hero. You set things in motion in Terranigma and you kind of start to question yourself and think I don't know, maybe I'm the bad guy. The world is peaceful when there's only plants and animals. You feel less lonely when the humans are introduced, but humans create problems. They build societies and technologies, ones that you end up having a direct hand in helping with. The towns grow in scale and they start, acting like societies. Greed, expansion, people stepping on each other to get ahead, hierarchies. You move forward in the game doing what you gotta do, but I distinctly remember feeling like the world was maybe a better place before I introduced humans to it. Ark is the hero in this game, yet he's also kind of indirectly responsible for everything that goes wrong. It's phenomenal, dude. These games don't just leave you feeling hooray, I saved the princess and beat the big bad. They leave you in a state of existential crisis. I can't overstate how impactful they are and how much they stand out on a console filled with bright, colorful, happy games. Quintet really did have something special going on. They had that secret sauce that made their games feel like nothing I had ever experienced before or since. But then they vanished.
Erased from existence.
Wait, did I already use that clip in this video? I mean, look, it's not like Quintet just up and disappeared right after Terranigma. They tried to hang on. I mentioned it in the intro. They made a few more games after the industry made the leap to 3D consoles, but they never had another hit like Gaia again. It's like they tried to keep up, but the times changed and small studios struggled. The jump from 2D to 3D meant the entire process developing a game goes through has to be reworked. Teams need to be larger, budgets need to be bigger, there's a lot more risk involved, and some small studios just couldn't keep up with that change. That's what I assume, at least. I have nothing to back that up, but it seems logical to me. Regarding Quintet, there was no big finale, no final masterpiece, no drama that accompanied their end. They just, much like the worlds in their games that you're powering through to save, they just kind of faded away. However, the more I research the company history, the more strange it gets. A single name appears on everything you read about them. Miyazaki. No, not that Miyazaki. No, not that one either. Get the hell out of here. This one, Tomoyoshi Miyazaki. He was the founder of the company and one of the main creative minds behind the games. One of the minds responsible for bringing us this phenomenal trilogy, and one day, he just vanished. No grand exit from the industry, no farewell interview, just gone. Never to be heard from again. I can't find anything about this dude these days, man. Like, everything is so mysterious around this. Aside from a few, my uncle worked at Nintendo, trust me bro, Reddit threads, there's very little about the man on the internet. It's just all very odd. So that leads us to today and the future for Quintet. Well, I mean, there is no future for Quintet, but for their IPs. In a world where remakes and remasters of old games flood our store pages, you would think these standouts are prime picks, member berries ready to be plucked from the vine and blended into a nice nostalgic smoothie for us 90s kids to gorge ourselves on. But I don't know, I don't think it's going to happen. Enix originally published the trilogy, so maybe Square has the rights now? Maybe they're still owned by Miyazaki, the man that disappeared without a word? There's really no telling, but there was an ActRaiser follow-up that was released a few years ago, and I don't know, man. Honestly, I hope these games never get remade. The games themselves already create such a mysterious atmosphere. They're weird and philosophical, they're uncomfortable at times, and they set out to tell these darker stories that nobody else at the time was attempting, and they succeeded beautifully. I think these 3 games are the perfect time capsule of what smaller devs could accomplish back in the day, and they're best enjoyed in their original format. I think a remake would just kind of bastardize it. It would be too bright and colorful. It would be too anime bullshit.
And what's the sword doing here?
Just play it how it is. But yeah, man, it's a fitting bookend. It's a mysterious fade out of existence for a company that was hell-bent on creating stories about worlds that faded out of existence. It's like poetry. With that, I have nothing else to say about Quintet. If you haven't played any of these games, dude, do yourself a favor. They aren't super long, they aren't overly complex, but they are such good standouts of the era that will stick with you for a long time after you reach the end. And if you have played them, let me know which one's your favorite. I'm genuinely curious about how they're received by their remaining fans. With all that, hey, I'm out of here. Thanks for making it to the end. I really appreciate it. What's up, guys? We're gonna smash that like button, fucking choke slam that subscribe button.